Hi, I'm Lisa Niven Kelly, and thanks for coming today for my Tornado Bead class. This has been a very popular class of mine, and I think you're going to enjoy it. It's a lot easier than it looks. It's very sculptural. It's very hard to make mistakes, because anytime there's a mistake, you can just kind of turn the wire around and make it look like you meant to do it. So I am going to be using today in the demo pre-oxidized wire for two reasons. One, because I like the look better of the oxidized bead, which we'll talk about in a little bit, and two, because the camera has an easier time focusing in and picking up the detail with the darker wire rather than the shiny wire. So if you want to start with pre-oxidized wire, all I do is I use liver of sulfur. I prefer that to oxidize my wire. I use it in the liquid form because that's what we have here at Beaducation.com. You can also use it in a rock form. Just follow the instructions, make up a nice little bath of it, put your wire in, make sure your wire's clean first, and wait for it to oxidize. Then bring it out, make sure it's, after you rinse it, make sure it's very dry before you start working with it. I wanted to give you a quick wire measuring tip before we get started. For each of these beads, we're going to be using 3 feet of wire. And I'm sure you've heard the saying that from your nose to the end of your arm is 3 feet. But actually, that depends on how tall you are. Usually your entire open wingspan is the same height as your body. So if you're 6 feet tall, from the end of the tips of your fingers will be 6 feet. So if you're 6 feet tall, then from here to here is 3 feet. I only mention this because one time I taught the class, this gal's beads were coming out really small and she could not figure out why. And I was like, well, are you measuring the wire right? And she said, yeah, I'm measuring it from my nose to my arm, but she had turned her head and she was 5'2". So this was only like 2 feet, and that's why her beads were coming out really small. So I know that on me, from my ear to the end of my hand is 3 feet. And it's just, get out a tape measure and measure it for you so you have that nice guide to bust out 3 feet. Because for these beads, it will be 3 feet, but it doesn't have to be exactly 3 feet. Before we get started, I just wanted to show you a couple of different beads. These are all made the same way from the same length of wire. They all have about 6 crystals per bead, splashed in with some Bali silver and the coils we made. But these 3, 1, 2, 3, were made with oxidized wire, and these were left shiny. There's no right or wrong, it's just a design element, it's what you prefer. I like my stuff oxidized, my mom likes everything shiny. So we have that ongoing battle, and that is just up to you. the tools and materials we're going to use today. We're going to use a nice flush cutter, and I'll talk about cutters a little bit more as we get started. A chain nose plier, 2 mandrels, again more info on those coming in a sec. If you bought the optional kit, they do come in the kit. A ring clamp that's going to help us out with coiling, and a nylon jaw plier, which can also help with coiling, but I kind of have it hanging around to help straighten any wonky wire that I might have. Here are the materials we're going to be using to make these beads, and again, this is enough materials to make 5 tornado beads. Over here we've got our sterling silver dead soft round 22 gauge wire. There's 20 feet there. In here we've got a mix of crystals. Now you can use any beads here, they just need to have a good size hole that will fit on a 22 gauge wire. So oftentimes pearls are a little too small with their holes, so I like to stick with the crystals. I like the way they look, and I generally use a mix of 3mm and 4mm. This specific mix is all 4mm, and we call this our ocean mix, but you can mix some 3mm in there too, it looks nice. Now over here is some Bali silver that I like in there just to throw a little splash of silver, and when we look closely at the beads you'll see that. Couple things to point out about the Bali silver. You don't want any beads that are larger than about 4mm because they don't fit well within the flow of this project. They just kind of sit off the edge. So this one right here, you can't really tell from where you are, but it's almost 4mm in its width. And that's about the biggest I would go. So in the mix that we sell on our site, they're all about this size. So if you're getting your own beads, just look for ones that are between 3mm and 4mm. Maybe you can push 4.5mm, but like on here we've got a 4mm star. This is a 3mm daisy spacer. So we just try to search the world over for small Bali silver, which is not real easy to find in interesting designs. That's why we've searched it over and we've put together some real nice mixes for you here. Now that you've had a chance to watch the coiling by hand free video, and I hope you had a chance to practice with maybe some copper wire, let's go ahead and get started on our sterling, building the coil that we're going to need for these beads. Now again, to let you know what is up with this coil, when are we going to use it, I'm going to show you this little bead right here. And you see how throughout the bead we use a coil. There's one there, and there's one there. Let me hold it here for you. It looks like we were working along with the wire work, stopped, built a coil, continued on, stopped, built a coil, but let me tell you that is very difficult. So we're going to do it the easy way. We're going to build the coils first, cut them up, and then just treat them as beads. Just string them on and incorporate them as we're going to do with the Bali silver and the crystal. A little tricky there, so let's get doing it. So here I've got the nylon jaw pliers I might need to help straighten my wire. I'm going to use the ring clamp to help coiling like you saw in the video. And then over here are the 2 mandrels that came in the kit and that you'll need for this project. I want to point out which one to use for what purpose. This little guy here is what we're going to use to build our coil on. He is about an 18 gauge. I'm just using our wire gauge here. He's about 18 gauge, so if you don't have this, what you need to find, if you didn't get the optional kit where we provide this, you need to find like an 18 gauge very hard wire, perhaps something from the hardware store. This is just steel that's been coated in copper. I don't need specifically steel coated in copper, it's just what I found at my welding store, and it's very hard, so I can coil on it without it getting all bent up. Now this larger one is what we're going to use to build the bead on. Do not build your coil on this larger one. I repeat, do not build the coil on the larger one, because the coil will be big and thick, it will have a larger hole, and it won't fit in well with the flow again of these beads. It'll be too large. This guy is about a 10 gauge. So on here it fits in, you can't see on there because it's so small, but it's 10 gauge. It's also 2.59 millimeters, and on the top it refers to inches, which is 0.102. So again, if you don't have this, a knitting needle works really well. Just remember, whatever size thickness of this mandrel you find, it's going to determine the size of the hole in the bead. So I like this size. I'll bring in the bead again to show you. It builds this size hole. I can maybe scoot it in there to show you. So it's on there now. And that will determine the size hole, and this is about perfect for me. A little bit thicker would make your bead a little larger, and a little bit thinner is not a good idea because sometimes the wires shift and you lose your hole. So go for at least this thickness of about 10 gauge. Again, in millimeters, that's about 2.6 millimeters. So we're going to put this guy aside for now, and we're going to concentrate on coiling. So let me put these away. And I'm going to start, like in your instructions, with taking off 2 feet of this wire. I just wanted to show you how I take it out of this spool if you've got it coiled up like this. Rather than undoing the wire and having everything go fling, I am going to find the end right there and tug on it, see where it gets shorter, and undo it here. It's just a nice, easy way to pull it out while retaining your wire in a coil. It doesn't have to be exact. I'm kind of faking it here. This is about 2 feet. That works for me. Let me cut it. I'll be right back. Okay, so I've got my wire now. I'm going to bring back in my ring clamp. And what I'm going to do first is get it started on here. Again, like I showed you in the free video, you can fold this in half and coil down one side and coil down the other. That works fine. In this case, this is short enough that I might just start it out with a little bit here, holding it, stabilizing it in my left hand. So again, I don't want to start way down here because this will poke myself. I want to start here. That looks about right. Hold this still in my left hand. Don't hold a tiny bit here because it'll be painful. Give yourself enough to really hang on to it. I'm just going to get the coil started, and then I'm going to clamp on the clamp to use as the stabilizing. So let's just get it started just a couple times around. It doesn't have to be perfect. That's all I need to be able to clamp onto it. So now I'll pull out the clamp and we'll zoom back a little bit so you can watch the whole motion. I come in with the clamp, pinch it down, put the wedge in, nice and tight, and now this is holding it for me. I don't have to do any squeezing with my left hand, which can get a little painful. And I'm just going to build my coil from there, making sure that my tail, which is over here, is behaving, not getting stuck on anything. The first couple coils, as you can see here, get a little funky, but after that, your goal, again, is to get them right next to each other. So I'm going to just continue off camera, and then I'm going to come back and show you how to cut these apart. So I finished building my coil here, and what I wanted to remind you of is where we had started back here with the clamp. As you build, you're going to need to unclamp the clamp and scoot it up to build some more, and scoot it up to build some more, because you're not going to be able to be working out here when it's in the clamp. This just gets way too wobbly, so I will bring it closer to stabilize. So now I'm finished. This gave me about 3 inches of coil. And I'm going to first pull it off of the mandrel and trim these tails off with my nice pointed cutters. And we're going to talk about cutters a little more in a second. Trim that tail off there. Trim that tail off, actually, yeah, I'll do that. I'll leave it right there. Trim it off right there. Now, before I cut this up, and this is really, really important for those of you that are starting with pre-oxidized wire, I'm going to put it back on my mandrel. Kind of twist it on there. And I'm going to polish it now, because if you cut them up while they're black, it's really hard to polish them up when they're incorporated into the bead with getting all sides nice and polished. So I'm going to come in with my Pro Polish pad and give it a nice hug and just swipe up and down. As I'm swiping, I'm turning this left hand like this to make sure that I'm getting all sides of the coil. I'll just bring it up close here so you can see the difference. See how over here it's nice and shiny, and over here it's still dark, mainly down at this end. So let me just continue with that. Get the other end now. That's looking nice. Okay. So I'm going to pull it off, and now I'm going to show you how to cut these up into smaller coils. Okay, I'm ready to cut this coil up into smaller coils. I just want to talk about cutters real quick. What I'm looking for in a cutter for this step is a cutter that has a nice pointy tip like this Tronix here. The Tronix are, in my opinion, the highest quality cutter that I prefer to work with. Another good cutter would be your Lindstrom cutter, as long as it has a pointy tip. Some of them have a really oval tip. We carry also a Xuron cutter, that would work well too. But I just wanted to show you these three and tell you why I don't like this one, why I do like this one, and why I really, really like this one. So I'll show you first with the basic cutter here. What we're doing here, so you can see the purpose, is we're going to be cutting these coils up into smaller coils, and we're going to be pressing lightly between two coils to form a gap, and then going into that gap with the tip of the coil and snipping the wire in the back that will separate these two, and hopefully giving you a nice clean edged coil. Now I'm going to go over that in great detail in just a bit, but I wanted to, while I explain the cutters, it'll make more sense to have already seen that. So I like these guys because they're a really flush cutter and they have a nice pointed tip. A cutter like this is way too bulky out at the tip, where you might be able to separate your coils with this cutter, or not, as I'm trying it. It's kind of just squishing the coils. Well, there it goes, it's separating it. But I'm not going to be able to get in there well enough to cut them apart. So give it a try with whatever cutters you have, but if you're struggling, and I say this a lot in class, it might just be that you're doing fine, but your cutters are not right for this project. Another thing that can happen is the tip of your cutters might be dull, so you might find yourself like chewing away at this point. My favorite cutter for this is the Tronix angulated cutter. So let me bring it up high so you can really see what's up with this guy. Do you see how the blades curve up? Actually, the blades only exist on this part of the cutter, not down here. They were first made mainly for electronics, for getting into tight spots like in circuit boards and such. I like it for getting into that little spot right here for cutting the coils apart. So let's do it again here. I'm going to use it to press lightly to separate them. I'm not cutting yet, I'm just forming a gap. And then that nice tip right there gets right into where I want it to be to cut it apart. And I try to hold that other one, otherwise it'll fling across the room. But that makes for good times too. So that's the scoop with these cutters. I'm going to go over cutting them apart again really quick, but really, really close up. And I'm going to use this guy and this guy, because it might be closer to what you have at home, to cut them apart. So now with some close-up detail, let's go over this again. And I want to talk about size of these coils as well. So the largest coil that I will cut would probably be about here. That's about 1/4 of an inch. Don't go much larger than that because then it sticks out the side of the bead and again doesn't flow smoothly around the bead. So my biggest would be around there. Let's cut this guy. And my blades are just on either side of a coil. I'm pressing lightly, not to cut. If I cut, it'll cut it in the wrong place. I'm just forming a gap, nice size gap. And now where we've got a tight coil here and then a gap and another coil there, there's one wire in the back, right where I'm putting my nail in. That's the wire you need to cut, and you need to cut it in the center to get both ends. Let me do it real quick here. Both ends coming off nice and clean. What I mean by clean is there's not like a crazy wire sticking up. So that looks good. Let me cut one the wrong way so you can see what a crazy wire sticking up looks like. I'm going to get this part right by just separating. Now what people do a lot of the time, instead of going straight back to the back, they'll cut up on the side like this. And where it leaves this one nice and clean, it leaves this one with a funky tail, and that will catch on stuff. So I just call this cleaning up your ends. When I first learned this technique, I had to clean up my ends probably 20 or 40 times. So just be patient with yourself. I'm going to come in to clean this up with my cutter. I'm going to just come with one side of my blade going actually into the hole and the other side coming out here and trimming it where it's coiled nice and smooth and cutting that funky piece off. So I have a clean start when I work on my next one. So maybe I'll do a shorter one now. I'll come in right here. I like to do little ones too. All these coils do not have to be the same size. What's going on here? Okay. Sometimes if you don't have your blades placed right, you actually just end up squishing down a wire, so you have to adjust them around a little bit. There, I've made my gap. I'm going to go in right there and cut in the back. That's a nice looking coil. Now I'll do it with the other tronics here. Make my little gap, go in and cut. The other thing you can do is, that one didn't come off super clean, see that? So I'm going to go clean that guy up. The other thing I do while I'm cutting these up is I kind of look at my coil, and if there's any imperfections like right there, I'll use that as a gap to cut a coil apart, you know, pretending like I meant to do it. Or right there, there's kind of a funky gap. When I get to that spot, I'll use that spot to open it up, and then it leaves the remaining little bead coils that you cut up being nice and tight, which is really what we're after here. Okay, so let's cut up some coils and then we will get started making the bead. Now you may have been asking, how many coils do I need to cut up? Right here I've separated out my Bali silver and my crystals that came in the prepackaged kit, optional kit, and I use about 2 coils per bead. So because the kit provides enough materials to make 5 beads, I've kind of separated them out so that I'm prepared to make the beads. A lot of people like to do it this way, especially those very organized Virgos out there. I myself like to do it like this. So that's where I'm going to start making the bead. Okay, now for the fun part. Let's start building these beads. So what I've got here is 3 feet of my 22 gauge dead soft wire, and this is the larger of the 2 mandrels. Again, this is the one we're going to be building the bead on, not the coil. So I'm going to start out by just holding a little bit in my left hand here to stabilize. I'm going to build it on this rod. I don't want to be way down here again, because as I go around I'm going to be scratching myself out here. So let's just get a comfortable grip on it. I'm going to be basically coiling, but in a very messy way at the beginning. So I don't need to be doing it really, really tight where I have to hold really tight onto this. Let's just secure it nicely. So what I want to do is build a bead about from here to here. It's about a 1/2 inch. And in my next demo, I'll actually mark the mandrel so that you know where you're working between here and here, but for this one I'm just going to fake it. It's always going to be a little funky over here, but I just start building. Sorry, I'm trying to keep this wire in check, and just loosely starting to build in that 1/2 inch area. You can see there. I'm just going to continue on, and the shape I'm looking for here is more of like a football shape. Although these beads turn out to be about roundish, we're not going to build this base round. We're going to build it kind of football shaped, and then when we add beads to the top, that is what's going to make it round. So let me bring it close to show you the progress. Now the nice thing again about starting with pre-oxidized wire is at this point I can stop and polish and then continue, whereas if I'd finished the bead and oxidized it at the very end, I could really only polish the tops, but this will give me a little more light coming from within the bead. So I'm just going to stop and lightly polish. You can see it really comes off easily with this Pro Polish pad. Pro Polish pads have a little micro abrasive in it, as well as a polishing compound, so they kind of do the job of a piece of steel wool and a polished cloth in one. All right, continuing on, building. Not building really tight. A lot of people, the very first one that they make, they'll build pretty tight. That tends to be how beginners start out, and that's okay. It's just that your bead's going to be a little smaller because it can be more dense. So I'm almost done here. I'm just filling up this little end part that I extended it on. And you want to stop when you have about 10 inches left on your wire. 8 to 10 inches, 12 inches is fine, it's not a big deal. But now we're going to use this remaining wire here to put the beads on. Again, before I start adding in my beads, I'm going to give it a little polish here. I like to bend my Pro Polish pad in half because it gives me a nice edge to dig into some of those grooves. All right, so now with this remaining amount of wire, we're going to add on the beads. One thing you need to make sure of though is that your wire here is coming out of the center of your bead. If you had just added, let's back out a little bit, a loop over here, you can't start adding your beads right now because it's coming in from the side. You need to give it one more go around so that it's coming out of the center of this bead. Otherwise your beads will sort of want to lay off to the side. I've got this big funky gap right here. I'm just going to try to push these wires over to fill it in. That works. Okay, so what I do is I first put on enough beads to cover half of the circumference of the bead, and then I'm going to wrap the wire around that to tack it down and then add on the other half. Because I have allotted myself 6 crystals for this total bead, I'm going to pick up 3 right now, and I'm going to kind of just toss in randomly some Bali silver. The Bali silver I don't get real organized about. I just make sure there's a splash of it. Don't neglect and forget your coils that you worked so hard on. So maybe one more. I'm just looking at the colors I've already picked up. I don't want to double up. Maybe one more Bali silver. And then I kind of lay it softly to make sure that it covers at least half the bead, which it does. Okay, so I'm going to lay these down, wrapping around. I'm going to hold this in position with my finger. And while I'm building the rest of this bead, I'm really going to be holding this bead as I'm adding things, so that I don't want to let go and have it fall out of shape before I've tacked everything down. So that's laid down. Now I'm going to let a naked wire come around and just kind of go on top of that to tack it down. All right, so now here I am with the other half. And sometimes all the crystals don't fit around. Maybe I'll end up with one side with one bead with 5 crystals instead of 6 or something. It really doesn't matter. This is a sculptural bead. Let's not get crazy here. Maybe one little coil. See how that fills. Okay, that looks good. Now, one thing design-wise I noticed that I did here by accident is I started this beadwork with a indicolite bead, and then I ended it with an indicolite bead, which I try to not get 2 colors right next to each other, but I'm really not going to worry about it. So here we go. We're going to lay these guys down. Looks like I have enough room to maybe stick one more bead in there. So maybe I will toss in a Pacific Opal. Okay. All right, those guys are laid down. Now with the remaining wire, I'm just going to come around and see how I'm stabilizing everything with my left hand. I'm going to come around a couple of times and just try to get the wire to overlap the beads, like right there, to kind of tack them down, and then just keep going. All right, so now everybody's on there nice and snug. And when I've got about 2 inches left, like I do have here, I'm going to tie off. And we're going to take this wire, we're going to find a nice big naked wire within here with no beads on it, and coil this wire around it twice. It's kind of like tying a knot. So I need to find a good spot. This wire looks good right here, if you can see that. I'm going to take this wire, my tail, and go underneath it. And now I need to enlist my chain nose. I'm kind of pull it down. Now this is the hardest part of making the beads, is tying off. This 22 gauge wire is thick enough that I can't just hold onto the tail and pull to pull down the slack. 24 gauge would sort of work that way, but this one I'm going to distort the whole bead if I just try to pull, no matter how well I stabilize it. So I'm actually going to come in right here. You can see the loop that's starting to form, and I'm going to take it with my chain nose and shrink it in by continuing turning it, and then try to get this wire tight on there. There it goes a little bit. Now I'm going to come in with my chain nose and try to squeeze. I'm squeezing and turning at the same time to get that wire to move. Now I'm ready to tuck it under again to continue this little coil. And twice around is good enough. See, it won't go any tighter than that, so I need to come in with my chain nose, scoot it around, and get it as tight as I can. That is not bad. Let's see if I can point it out to you right there. I'm going to come in and cut that tail a little bit long so that I can tuck it under, because I don't like tails sticking out. That's tacky and dangerous. All right. Might be hard to see, but if I give it a little polish there, You can see those. See those two wires right there? That's what I just formed. It's like tying a knot. Everybody's happy now. That's not going to come undone. So one more step to finish off this bead. See these loose wires here? That's going to happen from tying off and ending off. We're going to come in now and tighten them. To do that, I use my chain nose, and I'm just going to grab the wire, squeeze it, and rotate my chain nose, which actually will form like a little kink there, and it will shrink the outside wires by pulling them in and be nice and tight. So here's a good spot right here. See how wide and wonky this wire is? Stabilize everything while you do this. Grab and twist. It forms a little texture there and tightens everything down. Here's another good spot. Careful of that crystal right there. Twist. Oh, good. I was hoping this was going to happen. So when I did that, it tightened down, but on the opposite end, it kind of went crazy. And you see this great big wire here. This is something you need to watch out with each of these beads. You don't want any wire that's just pulling off of the side because it will just be nasty. So what I want to do with this wire is try to get it to come up into the bead and hook around like a crystal, like right there. I was able to pull it over these two lines so that now if I tighten it down, it's going to tighten around those and won't pull up and over again, hopefully. So right there, oh, that worked really well. So now this whole wire that's coming, let me polish it up because I think you can see it a little better. This whole wire that's coming around here and is nice and tacked down used to be hanging off the side, but I was able to loop it over these beads and squish it down next to it for security. So let me just check the back. This guy needs to behave a little better. And I just kind of rub around with my hand to make sure there's no wires that are pulling off. Now sometimes there's a lot of tightening down to do, like on this one, and sometimes there's not. Everything just sort of fell together. I like the tightening down because I like the look of it. I like to see this little bit of texture right here with the waves. Like you can see those two right there. I'm liking that. Okay, we're almost done. We just have one more step to finish it up. So to finish it up, I just need to give it a little final polish. Kind of getting all those spots, double check to make sure nobody's falling off. And then I'm going to pull it off the mandrel, and with this little tail here, I am just going to get my cutters as far into the hole as possible and trim it, and it does stay put really, really well. So with the tip of my pointy cutters, I'm going to go right in there and trim it so that now you can't even see it. Now you're just looking at this cute bead. So let's take a look at this bead. This is what happens a lot of times, so don't freak out if it happens to you. My beads kind of adjusted as I laid them on. I tried to get a strand on half and on half, but this is kind of a doubled up strands there and then no beads over here, which is really not the end of the world. And a lot of my finish projects, if you look closely at the beads, you might see a couple funky ones, but as they're all laid together, they look great. So I will say to you that the first couple of beads you make are going to be a little bit funky, maybe even funkier than this one, and that's okay. As you bust out 3 or 4 of them, you'll see them really come together nicely. One more thing I want to mention about these last steps on the bead. The reason I do all the tightening and twisting while it's still on the mandrel is because if you pull it off the mandrel and then do some tightening and twisting, if you end up tightening any of these outside wires without realizing it and they shift, you'll just have shut the hole of your bead. So by keeping it stable on the mandrel, it ensures that you have a nice size hole without filling that hole with loose wires. So now that you've made a couple of beads, and I hope you enjoyed yourself, you might be wondering what kind of designs you can work them into. I had a bunch of these beads laying around just from doing demos in class, and I decided to string it up with some kishi pearls. I like the contrast of the kind of hard cut pearls against these beads. And as my clasp, which actually sits in the front, I made a tornado toggle. It's a great toggle to go either with these beads or just on its own in the back or the front as a pendant design element. This one right here, in the class we make it with about half as much beads and wire that I used here. So this one's a little bulkier and I really like it. So there's one option. This is a necklace. And here is a bracelet. So this one, you can see I've done it a little more on the elegant side with some nice coin pearls. What I did interesting on this one though is I shifted it down to 24 gauge wire because I needed to incorporate some beads that had smaller holes. In fact, I think that on these beads here, I don't know if the camera can pick it up, but on these guys here, I've used tiny seed beads and tiny, tiny little pearls. And for those, I needed to use 26 gauge wire. So what I did was build the bulk of the bead with 24 gauge. I tied it off, and then I introduced a new wire of 26 gauge, maybe just a foot. Ran it through halfway, and then worked down half of the wire, adding the beads on, and then tied that off like I've showed you, and then worked the other half of the wire down and tied that off. So if ever you did want to incorporate some beads that had smaller holes, that is an option to bring in a smaller gauge wire. Now the other option where I've shifted down wire here, I've never made beads out of larger than 22 gauge, but on this bead here, I like tripled the amount of beads that I typically use and maybe tripled the amount of wire. So it's quite big if you compare it to one of the beads I usually make. I wear this one just strung on like a snake chain with a large hole Bali silver bead on either side, so it just sits in the middle, and it's really, really nice. So there's an option of a big bead. Here's another idea of another necklace. Actually, this necklace is two bracelets that I've just hooked together. You can see the back there and the back here. All I had to do actually was switch the T-bars on the bracelet, otherwise they wouldn't work with the other toggle bits. So like this T-bar goes with this toggle and this T-bar goes with this toggle. So I can't really wear them as bracelets anymore until I switch the toggle bars back. But I had these two bracelets laying around and I just thought they looked really cool as a necklace. This is my most favorite design here. And this is how I used to teach the class. We used to make this entire bracelet. But then the price of silver went up and it became a very expensive class. So now I started teaching it just as 5 beads. And I really, though, like this look. And I'll tell you what I've done here. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 beads on there. And between them, I have a coil. You know how to build a coil. You know how to cut up a coil now. And what I've done is I have strung them with a Bali silver spacer on either side of the bead. Do you see that guy right there and right there? Because my coils on this one I made smaller, around a smaller mandrel, and they'll just cruise right on into the hole of the bead, so that's sort of to clog it up. And I also like the look. So I've cut up coils, even coils here, to fill the space between the beads, and ended it with a tornado toggle. And this is a really, really nice look. Okay, so we're all done. I demoed that one bead for you, but all the beads are made the same way. And I'm glad we had that little mistake of the wire falling off the side, because that's a really important thing to see. how to problem solve it. And again, you may have some funky ones. If you look closely at the design ideas, when we zoom in on my bracelets with my beads, some of them are quite funky as well. So just accept it, and it just adds character, right? Use these beads in earrings, bracelets, necklaces. They look really great. They're pretty light and, as you've seen, quick to make. Play with the gauges. You can step down the gauge a little bit to make them a little smaller, or again to incorporate smaller hole beads. Just have a good time. It's sculptural work. Go crazy with it. Thanks. Hi, I'm Lisa Niven Kelly. This tornado bead class has been a very, very popular class of mine, and I think you're going to enjoy it. It's a lot easier than it looks. It's very sculptural. I just wanted to show you a couple of different designs you can work them into.